A baby new year starts out every January the 1st. Innocent and young as springtime.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time, but welcome back to anyone that's been here before. Thanks for popping in. This is the monthly wrap-up for December. And I have read less than what I would consider to be normal now in December. Probably not that different from what I did the previous December. But it's funny because I now have certain expectations because I do read more now that I have a channel. So I've read consistently before, but I've ramped it up a lot more. And some of the other things that I used to do that took more time, I've taken some of that out to find more time to read. So when I say on my videos that I read between like 6, 7 or 8 books a month, that's more than what I used to read before I had my channel. I'd read like, I don't know, 2 or 3 a month, something like that. So yeah, it's a smaller amount than most of these monthly wrap-ups, but it's still more than what I was reading before. So what have I been reading? So the month began with me finishing Alien Clay. So I was in the middle of it when December came along, and I did a video on the channel about it as well. I really liked it. It's not as good as the Children of Time trilogy, and it's not as good as Dogs of War. I think I definitely liked it more than the 2 novellas I read by him. But yeah, I've still got lots to read by him. I think he's amazing, and there's lots of good stuff about this. I was buddy reading this with Dave from Book Blather, and he didn't like it as much as I did. He still said that, you know, that there's some good stuff in there, but he was disappointed by it. But I liked it lots. So Alien Clay, and then I was very keen to get this started because this is a buddy read, and it's like 570 pages or something. 580 pages. So it's a big one for me, and as a result, I'm still reading it. So this is something I started right at the beginning of the month with Kim from Middle of the Book March, and we've been chatting about the book on Voxa while we've been reading it, which has been a fantastic experience. It's a really good book, really, really good book. There was one bit of it I didn't like, which I'll tell you more about when I do a proper review of it. But yeah, I think it's a phenomenal book, really, and it's beautifully written. It's a very important book. So yeah, I'm kind of more than halfway through now, but I was aware that I didn't really want to get to the end of the month and I'd do a monthly wrap up where I just go, well, I've been reading this, so I've been nipping into some short stories and that sort of thing while I've been reading this. So that's the rest of what I've got to say about what I've read, really. A very short novel and a few short stories. So I've been trying to concentrate on this, but it is December. So obviously the end of December, Christmas happens and it all goes a bit crazy and you don't get as much time to read. The week before we break up is so hectic. I get absolutely knackered in that week. And then Christmas is always complicated. So, yeah, I have found time to read most days, but I've not always been in the best frame of mind or best energy level to read, even if I found the time to do it. So anyway, this has been a really good experience so far, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be a really good experience, and it's great reading it with Kim from Middle of the Book March. She's awesome. Okay, so one of the things that happened, I went to the Indian takeaway down the road, and I knew I'd be sitting there waiting for my meal, and I thought I'd quickly grab a book that I can just slip into my coat pocket. I must have a little paperback somewhere. I can quickly read a quick paperback, and I'll like read some of it and then finish it off in the next day or so, and it can be some sort of alternative to The Invisible Man. If it's a really short book, I can just nip into it and I can start it in the Indian takeaway while I'm waiting for my food. It'd be a good 20-25 minutes, so I can get a nice bunch of pages read. So the first book I found that was small enough to slip into my coat pocket was Earl Stanley Gardner's The Case of the Dubious Bridegroom, with a very saucy picture. Perry Mason's story, and it's a very dinky book. I like books like this, these little vintage books that are really cool. And slipped into my coat pocket, started to read it. I was really enjoying it. I thought, oh, this is cool. It's a bit different. It starts with quite a funny little scene between Perry Mason and this woman that sort of goes into his house from a window, or his flat maybe. I can't remember now. I have to start again. But anyway, that was a really nice beginning. I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to enjoy this. And then I read about, so I think I read about 15 pages and then completely forgot about it. So anyway, I'll pick that up again. That was fun. That was a fun little interlude. And my mate at work lent me this, and I'm going to read all of this. But so far, I have just read the $1 million banknote. Well, no, does it say £1 million banknote? £1 million banknote. That's a sterling sign. The £1 million banknote, which is a very famous story that's been ripped off and turned into different films and stuff. But even though it's a very famous plot, it didn't go where I was expecting it to go. The ending is quite surprising, and it's a cute little story that I won't tell you what kind of story it is because it will spoil the ending. But it wasn't what I was expecting, and I really enjoyed it. Mark Twain's great, and I did start to read The Mysterious Stranger as well, but I need to go back into that. So this is a nice little, very short book with a few stories that my friends lent me. So this is a book that's got, I'll tell you what's in here. So it's got The Mysterious Stranger, it's got the £1 million banknote, the Notorious Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, and The Men That Corrupted Handleyburg. So those are the 4 stories that are in here. And I know the Notorious Jumping Frog is really famous as well, but maybe all 4 of them are really famous. But yeah, the £1 million banknote, definitely worth reading if you can find it, because it was an awesome story. And you might, as you're reading, you might think, oh, I know this story, I know how it's going to end, and it doesn't end how you're expecting it. So that was really cool. And then I read I Am Scrooge, a zombie Christmas story, a zombie story for Christmas, written by Adam Roberts. So it's the Adam Roberts, the guy that's written lots of science fiction stories, I'm pretty sure. I didn't even look it up, but I think it is. There's nothing here saying this is the man that also wrote. Yeah, there's no information in this at all. But this was an interesting read. It wasn't the Christmas Carol story beat for beat, but with zombies in it. The plot was very different in the end. But Marley was a zombie, and there is a zombie outbreak in the background of what's happening, but the 3 ghosts have got very different roles in it. And so it was a bit of fun. On Goodreads, I said it was just like a nice little interlude, a nice little distraction, nothing groundbreaking, but a bit of fun. You know, so yeah, it was nice to read it for Christmas. One thing I didn't read, which I wanted to read, so shout out to Dave and Joe, because I said we were discussing what Christmas related things we were going to read, and I was going to read one of the Charles Dickens stories that's not a Christmas Carol, one of his Christmas stories that's not a Christmas Carol, and I had the book for it, but I didn't get to it. So there we are. There's also this one. So this is Silvina a Campo, and this is a short story collection that I bought in London about 8 months ago. The Imposter and Other Stories. And I've read 4 stories in here. And it's really odd because basically the first story I read, I was really impressed with. I thought, oh, I'm going to like this author. That's really good. And that was a story called The House Made of Sugar. The House Made of Sugar. It was a really interesting story. It was very eerie. The atmosphere was really cleverly done, very unusual. There was this sort of suspense and this tension there just from the confusion and curiosity of the 2 main characters and the odd conversations they were having in this town they just moved to. and it's like about identity, and the main woman in the story keeps being mistaken for somebody else, and it kind of goes from there. I won't spoil it because it is worth reading if you can get hold of it. The House Made of Sugar. So that's the second one in the book, but the first story is The Imposter, which is the title story, and then there's two after it, Forgotten Journey and Strange Visit. And The Imposter, I think, is very famous in Argentina, where Silvina Campo comes from. It's a very important author in Argentina. And The Imposter I found really disappointing. It seemed to be overly poetic for the sake of it. Their conversations were completely unnatural and quite random sometimes. So it wasn't clever writing. I didn't feel like it was. Certainly in the dialogue, it seemed really awkward and didn't flow very well. And it felt like a massive ramble. When it got to the end, I thought, oh, is that it? And that was quite a long story. It's about 60 pages, I think. So I was expecting, especially with a title like The Imposter, I was expecting something really interesting to develop in the story, but it wasn't really much development. So there was some development, but not enough to warrant reading it. So yeah, I wasn't impressed with The Imposter. And the other two stories were incredibly short and very slight and ineffective. So it was a bit odd because I was very enthusiastic and impressed by the first story, The House Made of Sugar, and the others were deeply unimpressive. So we'll see how we get on with the rest of the book, because if there's more like The House Made of Sugar, it'd be great, because I really, really liked it. It wasn't like I liked it, but I really liked it. So it'd be nice to see if it can present more stories with that kind of quality for me anyway. I mean, The Imposter is a very famous story, I think, so I'm sure it's probably me rather than Silvina or Campo, but The House Made of Sugar was really, really good. And it was only about 12 pages, so if you can get hold of it, it wouldn't take you long to read it. So there we are. So those are the things that I've read in December, and I'm continuing to read The Invisible Man. And I've got this nice situation in January where I have got a relatively free reign once I've finished that. I'll probably read some band stuff, like I do want to read Lolita soon. Still haven't read The Handmaid's Tale. But there's some other things I want to read that are going to be much more lighthearted, which I can kind of delve in between as well. So that'll be good. I'm looking forward to those. So what did I put on the channel this last month? So I started the month with a discussion about Brandon Sanderson and all the different series of books that I haven't finished, which I had fun talking about. There's various things I touch on, different books that I've started that have been part of a series. And always, really, stuff I've been impressed with, but I just haven't got back to the second part or the third part, whatever. And then I did a video about Dave because I knew we were coming up to the anniversary of when we started our show. And I wanted to do a video just saying how much I don't take it for granted. I think it's awesome that we have these friendships, and he's a close friend. Love him to death. Then I did a video of sci-fi and fantasy recommendations from a bunch of booktubers. So this was a follow-up to the other one I did at the end of November, where I had 32 booktubers recommend their favorite book of the year, and this was another 12, or I think it ended up being 13 or 14 booktubers talking about their favorite fantasy and sci-fi books. And in that, I also did my own reworking of 12 Days of Christmas, which was a bit of fun. My favourite bit was me singing Three Hench Bens. Still makes me giggle. That was funny. So that was good. But that took me so long to make. So it wasn't just learning the song and writing the song, and then getting all the videos from the other booktubers, but they had loads of editing problems with that. Things kept going wrong with the software, and it just took me so long. It took me 2 weeks from when I first started planning it, but actually even just the editing itself took about a week, which is mental. So there was that one. And then I did a video, vintage science fiction books and it was answering the question, does scarcity make reading science fiction more enjoyable? Which was a question posed by sci-fi, vintage science fiction, vintage sci-fi, vintage SF. I think he calls himself vintage Richard Rimple, Richard from sci-fi, vintage sci-fi. Oh my god, Richard from Vintage SF, really good channel, and seemingly a very nice guy. And I wanted to do a video responding to that, where I said basically I don't personally think it makes it more enjoyable to read science fiction, but it clearly makes collecting science fiction more fun and enjoyable. If you can find a really good rarity, it's very exciting. If you know something's scarce, it's great to find it. And then I put out my Alien Clay review. Then I did recommendations for 32 different genres, and this was bouncing off something that Aaron Read a Book had done on his channel. That was also bouncing off somebody else. So I did my version of that, which was a lot of fun to make. So lots of people seem to get some nice recommendations on there, which is good. Then I did a kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, 70 books I want to read before I'm 70. I'm clearly nowhere near 70. So I thought it was quite funny that I'm giving myself over 16 and a half years to read those 70 books. But, you know, it's a nice excuse to talk about the books I want to eventually read, some of the things I'm going to read immediately in the next few months, as well as some other things I might not get to straight away. Then I did my 13th part of the Twilight Zone deep dive. So we're over halfway now. So which is really cool, because there's actually 25 parts to it. Because I decided to do the last episode, I did more than just the normal amount of episodes, because there were a lot of duffs in the last little batch of episodes, so I did them together because it would have been too much negativity. So yeah, there's actually 25 parts to that series. So my 13th part appeared on the channel, which was great. And then I did a book tag called Reading Books About Reading Books, which was a book tag that I was tagged in by Pat from Book Chat with Pat. I ended up talking for a fair chunk of it about music, and yeah, I felt like I really sort of felt like I'd really said something that was quite important to me in that video. And then I did a surprise video. I wasn't expecting to do this, but I found out that Rod Serling had written a reworking of A Christmas Carol, so I immediately watched it, and then I immediately put on a review of that film on the channel, kind of connected to the Twilight Zone deep dive because it's Rod Serling. I put it in the playlist for the Twilight Zone stuff, and it was a really interesting thing to watch it. It's on YouTube. That was really interesting to see, and it was just something I knew about years ago, but I'd forgotten about it. Then I did a video about mince pies on Christmas. It was on Christmas Eve. Then after Christmas, the Starathon announcement came up. So that's me announcing me being a co-host again, which is great. So I've got some plans for that. So I'll be weaving the history books in between all the fiction stuff I'm reading, and my bi-monthly book club as well, which is more kind of anthropology and philosophy and psychology, that kind of thing. Then I did a video choosing 12 specific vintage science fiction novels that I want to read in 2025. So that was bouncing off Michael K. Vaughan, but that was a fun one to do as well. Then I did my top 10 books of 2024. Then I did my plans for 2025, which is quite extensive, quite ambitious year I'm setting myself up for, but I should be able to pay lip service to all of it, and hopefully some of it in a lot of detail. And then my Christmas book haul appeared, where I talked about, just a very short video where I talked about what I got for Christmas, really because there might have been some things that you could go, oh, I'll read that one, that's good, you know, that kind of thing. And then obviously there was the Paxi Awards, so that was me continuing what started with Pax Panic, and I wanted to do that just to kind of keep her memory up here on YouTube. I still miss her and still think it's crazy she's not around. So there we are. That was my December. January is a new year, new month, new attitude, see what comes up, see how much free time I get. I'm not gigging that much, but we have got plans to rehearse the new songs for the new album. We are close to finishing the next Bemis album, which is exciting. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy January. Stay curious, everybody.
Paint me a picture of what it's like to be